So this is kind of touching into the multiverse idea, is it not? Or am I correct in that?
That's right. So if what we're saying is that the numbers that these parameters have, the ones we observe, are just accidents of cooling, and we could go into more technical details about symmetry breaking and so on. Don't really need to do that. The whole idea is that it sort of fell out in that particular pattern. But if you do another bang, it may fall out in a different pattern and so on. And then if you do this an infinite number of times, of course, you're assured that somewhere in that collection is going to be a happy universe in which the numbers come out just right, the Goldilocks universe. And here we are. It's no surprise we're living in a universe that supports life. We couldn't obviously live in a bio-hostile universe. So it becomes a selection effect. And then, so if you don't want design, if you don't want to have a god or an agent or we don't even have to use those terms, but any element of teleology or preordained design, don't want that, then the alternative is to go, or one alternative is to go for this, vast array of a smorgasbord of universes, of which we're obviously living in a palatable one.
So I mean, how would you test for a multiverse idea? Because to me, as a Christian theist who's again enamored with fine tuning, it seems to me that the multiverse idea is on par with appealing to a transcendent personal creator. I mean, you really are pushing, in my perspective, you're pushing on the boundaries of what truly is scientific or a scientific idea. If the idea isn't testable, the difference really between the multiverse and appealing to a transcendent creator would be, one is providing a materialistic explanation, where the other explanation is appealing to the work of a mind. So how would you react to that comment?
Well, you don't have to be a Christian to say that this multiverse idea is unscientific. And I mentioned these people who want a final unified theory, and a lot of these people are string theorists. And we could get into that if you wanted, but they would say, no, we don't need a multiverse, and we don't need a designer. We just need this final theory that would explain everything. I think that's flawed for a number of reasons, which we could get into. But coming back to this very interesting challenge that I've put out many years ago, if there are any theologians who are good at mathematics and want to take on this challenge, there's an old, rather tired argument about is it simpler to believe that there's just a universe, or to believe that there is an agent or a mind or a god behind the universe who created it with all the complexity it has. And Richard Dawkins, for example, has sometimes said, well, the creator would have to be even more complex than the creature. So you're not simplifying things, you're making it more and more complex. So then is a multiverse more complex than a god? Now, you could quantify this. There's something called algorithmic information theory, where you can actually say how much complexity, as defined by this algorithmic information theory, how much complexity is there in your explanation. And so you take a particular model of God, pick your favorite one, and a particular multiverse model, and you could try and work through the mathematics and say, well, actually, the multiverse turns out to be simpler, or the agent turns out to be simpler. You could actually settle that argument using mathematics, but it needs somebody who is conversant with the mathematics and the theology to be able to carry that out.
Hugh has been fairly silent on this, and there was
he could do it.
There was so much common ground on this that I knew we were going to part ways here eventually. And Hugh, what are your thoughts on this? Because I kind of lean toward fuzz, and no disrespect, Paul, but it's the kind of the God of the gaps. It's the multiverse of the gaps, if you will, that it was inevitable. Hugh, what do you know about multiverse, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's not just Christians. A number of non-theists have argued that the multiverse is not a good way to go. I mean, Leonard Susskind, for example, has pointed out that we agnostics and atheists have got to stop using that argument, because we're trying to use it to explain why there's no mind behind the universe. But if we take it to its logical conclusion, it basically says that we have no mind either. So you could literally use the multiverse to explain away all the research papers that every scientist has ever published without invoking any actual scientists producing those papers. So he says, we got to stop using this as a bad philosophical argument. And once again, I think we need to give credit to history. It wasn't just Leonard Susskind who pointed this out. Philosophers centuries before us pointed out the fact that appealing to an infinity really is not an appropriate philosophical way to go. And in terms of trying to appeal to some grand unified field theory to kind of explain away the design, what I have been able to do mathematically, Paul, is actually look at these different avenues where we try to say, well, let's see if we can condense this design into one parameter. What you discover is you're simply moving furniture. Yes, you can reduce the fine tuning of one parameter, but you wind up boosting it up in another parameter. You might be able to reduce it in 4 parameters and put it into one, but the fine tuning you have in the one is either equal or greater to the fine tuning you had in the 4. And so just recognize this furniture moving that often goes on unnoticed. And I think that's why we have to involve scientists and other disciplines, because often what we're doing is we're moving the fine tuning out of astronomy and physics into another discipline, and people in that discipline will say, hey, wait a minute. Yeah, you moved the fine tuning out of your discipline, but now you've dumped it on us. And so we actually need to do an integrated scientific analysis of this to see what's really going on.
One of the problems that I have with the multiverse is that you can't just wave your hands and say, let there be a multiverse. You need some sort of model for that. And we actually have a model which is very favored. It's the eternal inflation model of Linde. And this is a natural way that universes can sort of pop into being through a quantum tunneling process in this large inflating superstructure. And a lot of people think that this is an excellent model. But the thing is that to get that model to work, you have to have a universe creating mechanism. That mechanism is basically quantum mechanics. You have to have general relativity to describe the space-time. So you've still got a lot of ingredients. It's still a law-like system. And so what you've done is you've shifted the problem from the extraordinary features of this universe to the rather extraordinary features of the multiverse. So you don't explain everything. It's eternal inflation. So like the old steady state theory of Fred Hoyle, has no beginning and no end. So our universe has a beginning, a middle, and maybe an end. But the eternal system, the superstructure or multiverse itself, has no beginning or end. But of course, you don't explain something just by saying it was always there. You still need to ask, why does it have the features it does? Why that multiverse with those meta laws that operate and enable universes to come into existence? So for me, I'm perhaps less worried these days about the fine-tuning issue. I'm more interested in why there are laws in the first place. Why is it that compact mathematical relationships capture the nature of reality? And even more astonishing, why is it that there exist beings, namely ourselves, and maybe others, who can come to understand this, that can not only observe the universe, but can grasp what is going on. That is, that they're not just part of the cast, that they can see the plot of the play. And that I think is really tremendously significant. And when people say about anthropic selection in the multiverse, they're only concerned about that we observe a universe consistent with life, but we understand it. That goes beyond mere observation. That, for me, is the real challenge, to explain, as Einstein said, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. And that's what I tend to zero in on.